Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Spilling the Tea on GovCon. I'm Teresa Moon, Director of Market Strategy for Parabolis. We are the preeminent partnership for government contractors, providing holistic support that includes a line of credit to fund your growth. The purpose of this podcast is to assist small businesses with success in the federal marketplace by introducing them to industry experts and resources that they may not otherwise know about. Today, my guests are some of the most experienced subject matter experts this show has ever hosted. And I'm so proud to link arms with them and to share with you their breadth of knowledge and influence in this industry. The team is comprised of the founders of AFWorks, AF Ventures, and Agility Prime. Please welcome the team from Auxo, Austin DeLorme, Megan VanHorn, and Haley Yeagley. Ladies, this show was made for discussions like this. So I can't wait to pick your brains and share your expertise with our audience. So if you would please take a few minutes to introduce yourselves, share your exemplary military experience, any accolades there, and your focus at Auxo. And if you're too humble, I'm going to be letting everyone know details. So just to let you know, you've been forewarned. I know how this works. So go ahead and in any order, introduce yourselves.
Awesome. Well, I'll jump in first. Hi, I'm Austin. I did about 10 years active duty in the Air Force. I've done another 5 now on the reserve side, and I've spent that entire time in the federal acquisition space. I specifically am a scientist for the Air Force. So my background is in nuclear physics by education, but program management by trade. And my role has been to develop and transition early stage technologies into operational use. For me, very early on, I got very enamored and maybe frustrated with this challenge of tech transition and how to actually get tech out in the field. And as I started to, in maybe a less tactful young lieutenant way, bash on doors to try to solve that problem, I learned a ton beyond just what we were developing inside of the DoD into what was happening on the outside, and really got my hands around this notion of public-private partnerships and of the criticality of commercial industry and how it was growing and how the world was changing around that. And with that, I found myself in the right groups with the right people to get involved in a big push to really change the way we innovate as Department of Defense. And so I got to be on the ground floor with some of the really early efforts to change public-private partnerships from, learning from DIU X 1.0 to being involved in the stand-up of AFWorks and standing up a portfolio of organizations since. And I have since then now been an advisor on the stand-up of a lot of organizations that fit that bill, to include, Army Futures, SpaceWorks, all of the like, and have really grown a passion and appreciation for the role that specifically small businesses, but all non-traditional partners play in national defense and the role of abundance. And so I've been separated now for family reasons for about 5 years from active duty, but have continued to fight this fight and push this role on the outside, and really excited to go back to a place where we can really scale knowledge, which was a part of my passion on the inside with a uniform on, now with this incredible team on the outside. So that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm gonna go next. And as long as I've been working with Austin, both in the military and since then, I should know better than to let her go first, because it's always intimidating to go after Austin. I'm Megan VanHorn. I'm another one of the founders here at Auxo. Like Austin, I'm a former Air Force military officer, also in the acquisition space. However, my focus was a little bit different. I was a former contracting officer, so we work often hand in hand with program managers and with engineers on major weapon system programs, working with small businesses, working with non-traditionals. So Austin and I first worked together at Special Operations Command, which is where I first learned about some of the more challenging issues that face small businesses, non-traditional businesses, and warfighters that are trying to do things quickly. I spent about 8 years in the military, working a number of different contracting type assignments, and then similarly to Austin, separated from active duty mostly for family reasons, as well as to pursue some professional goals. And since then have been working almost entirely with small and non-traditional defense contractors. My focus is a little bit nerdier than Austin's, more on the kind of contracting, legal, pricing, accounting side. But it's a lot of fun, and it's been quite a learning experience to switch perspectives and see the decisions that we make on the government side and how they impact real small businesses. And I would say, if anything, working with small and non-traditional businesses and industry has made me more passionate about creative contracting and the things that the government can do to help strengthen the industrial base. So that's me. All right, Haley, sorry, I wanted to jump in because I also don't want to have to go after you. So
No. I guess I'm last. Hi, I'm Haley. I, like Austin, did about 10 years active duty as an acquisitions officer, except for I was a developmental engineer with the education background in systems engineering and industrial engineering. So a little bit different flavor of acquisitions than these other two ladies. I kind of worked a lot of different programs, everything from nukes at the Nuke Weapons Center at Kirtland, did some ISR soft aircraft integration with Big Safari, spent some time down at SOCOM working on Talos, which is the Iron Man suit, which is kind of cool to Google. We did some really cool tech development down there. And finished up with weather radars. Like these ladies, I separated, not because I didn't love it, but it was just kind of the right thing for my family. So transitioned over to the reserves and still serving that way in the same capacity as an engineer. And actually, it's because of these two wonderful women that I actually got into, helping small business when I was done. I was still really passionate about being able to help the defense ecosystem. I also learned as a young lieutenant, a young captain, that there were so many other options for solutions for us, especially when I was at Big Safari and we had the ability to go fast and we had the ability to do these things. And I'm like, why don't I have more choices? I know that they're there and I could help these companies do it if I was in a different role. And so these women really encouraged me to reach out to that industry when I got out. And we've kind of all been working together since to try to help these non-traditional small businesses, solve some of the problems that we saw active duty, and we still see as civilians now.
That's amazing, because that's exactly where the rubber meets the road as far as industry supporting the mission internally of the government. And I love that each of you have similarities in the efforts of supporting small businesses, but come to it from different professional prowesses. And I think that's what makes you guys the triple threat that you are. So I'm excited to share to our network the breadth of knowledge that you have internally and externally to the way the government contracting environment works. And so let's really dive into the meat and potatoes of why I have you on here today. And so I'd like to start primarily talking about Auxo. The reason behind and the inspiration behind the creation there. If you could jump in and share with our network about that.
Yeah, I'll give a little background there. So for a long time, and this stems, way back to the early AFWERX days, there's been this passion for an understanding that for true national security in the long term, we need to grow the defense industrial base. And we could get deep into some of the challenges when more IP is being built on the private side than being housed in the public side, and the impact on public good. But national security is dramatically impacted by that. And there is this growing trend of continuing to go to some of the same folks over and over again, and we're seeing them fail. And so in order for us to change behavior, of course, on the inside, there's all sorts of cultural things that we need to tackle. But on the outside, we needed to bring more people to the table. And at AFWERX, we put a lot of effort into making that happen, making it more appealing, encouraging venture capital to come to the table. We won't get into all of that. On the outside, what we found is there was a knowledge gap. Mm-hmm. And so as we started to work with companies, we started to see this sort of same issue that we felt on the inside, which is if you're a prime, you're going to come to me and you're going to have all the answers because you're going to have hired 40 people from inside the government. Mm-hmm. And if you're a small business or a non-traditional, you're immediately disadvantaged because you're harder for me to work with, because you have questions, you don't know what to give me, you're making me do more work. And so there are so many reasons why smalls and non-traditionals really struggle to get into the system. And then once they're in it, to stay in the system and succeed in the system. And so our thesis is that if we can expand the knowledge and build a bigger community around the small business ecosystem and create that knowledge abundance that a large corporate entity has in a more organic and affordable way for smalls, then we can enhance the number of smalls that are succeeding and thriving in the business space. And we believe very much in the abundance mindset that the more small businesses that succeed and break through, the more will continue to succeed, because folks on the other side will see that this is a pathway and it's viable, and that they shouldn't just, go call our friends over at Raytheon, right? So I think for us, it was, how do we scale that knowledge? How do we bring that together? And how do we build that at scale? And as we started to work together, we found we're answering the same questions over and over. What ways can we bring that together? And so Auxo is all about bringing and building education, and that's going to start launching next year for us. It's also about putting out information and questions that continue to get answered inside of our smaller world at a broader stage. And so that's what our blog is all about. And it's about bringing our different information together, our different knowledge together. So you heard from our team, we're all acquisitions, but we're all from very different places in the acquisition ecosystem. And there are questions that Megan and Haley can answer that I cannot and wouldn't try to. I think in the small business ecosystem, a lot of times you get like one consultant or a small team, and they only have the knowledge that they come to the table with. And so how can we create a better community around that education arm so that we can bring all of that knowledge to the table? So that's something that we're working on over here too.
I love everything that you've said, but the explanation for why internally with the government that sometimes the small business interaction is stifled is because of that lack of education piece. And we talk about it a lot in our industry about being able to advocate for yourself. And the more that you know, or build a team of external resources around you that can help you advocate down that path. For us, of course, it's financial, but the more that you know, or you build a team of knowledgeable experts around that topic for you, the more attractive you become to the opportunities that you can put yourself in front of. And so that's a perfect segue into everything that this program is about, is really teaching small businesses on how to best advocate for themselves, because there is no foundation in any other market that is a building tool or a teaching tool for them to do business with the federal government. It's different. And so even though you might have that best new technology, you might not know how to get it in front of the right people and make sure that you're effectively presenting it, but then inserting yourself into the conversation for executing on that mission. And so it's wonderful that we have you now to extend to our marketplace of that level of knowledge of how to be effective on that point. Because a lot of small businesses get very, very discouraged very quickly because they don't know how to speak the government speak. They don't know how to speak military speak. And because of that, they kind of take themselves out of the running because nobody wants to work harder than they already are to try to figure out where they can fit you in. So I love that already you've paved out that way for one of the very most important aspects of doing business with the federal government as a newer or small or growing business, that education side, directly with marketing yourself effectively to the places where you can be used and be efficient. I love it. I think that's incredible. And each of these questions that we'll walk through are going to build on that too. And so if you have a pen and paper, ladies and gentlemen, take it out, because you're going to get good tips here on reasons why groups like Auxo are going to be effectively helping you level up, so that you're not only being able to showcase what your proficiencies are, but you're going to be able to market them to the places that you can participate in a lot faster than if you just try to bootstrap it. So with respect to the introductions that you just gave earlier, and given your unique backgrounds working on government side of acquisitions, can you share insights on what government professionals in particular care about?
Yeah, I'll kick off at the generic level, because I'm the market entry, how do you get started person, right? You'll get the really good tactical details when I pass over to Megan and Haley here, who have really lived in the contracting office and in the program office in a more meaningful way. But I think at its face value, there is what is being said strategically, which we all latch onto. This is what we want. This is what we need. You might be having some conversations with operators. That's great. But then there's a very tactical side of getting technology into the system. And I think that's often lost and forgotten because we're all scrambling. But what folks don't see is that it is a hustle on the other side too, right? So I used to joke, I'm married to a pilot, and there were all these news articles about the crisis of this 80% manning inside of the flying world. And I was like, man, we've been 50% manned in acquisitions for decades, and nobody is writing news articles about this, right? So we're all working 100-hour work weeks and have been since at least sequestration. We're tired, we're busy, and we also have a job to do, which is getting the information up, making sure our bosses have what they need, making sure that the right snippets are in the right congressional ask, right? All of these things And when we partner with someone who knows that system because they've worked in the inside, again, one of these primes, they know how to do all of that. And so they hand me everything I need and they make my job easier. And so in the absence of that, when I'm working with a small business, I can be super altruistic, but at a certain point I burn out. And the sad truth is most of these really innovative, awesome champions across federal do burn out. There's a reason almost none of us that started the AtForks effort are still wearing a uniform. Because you have to do a whole lot of extra work to make that happen. And so I think the thing to be mindful of is your job is just not just meeting this strategic mission. It's not just getting the thing out to the warfighter so that they can fight better and save lives. That is really important. However, if you really want to thrive and succeed in this industry, you also have to make it easier on the person who's doing the paperwork on the other side and help them get through that process and get you through that process in a way that they can actually accomplish. Because at the end of the day, if I have a choice between getting it done and not getting it done, I'm going to take Raytheon even if your product is worse or better, or even if their product is good. And so just because then I can actually get it done and I'm actually fielding something on the timeline I need to field it on. And so I think being mindful of that is the big thing. And I'll pass over now to Megan and Haley to get more in the weeds on some of that.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Austin, and I can be more specific, but I think that is a core misunderstanding that a lot of small businesses have, right? They think that the priority is going to be, well, clearly my technology is so much better, or clearly my price point is so much lower. And they do underestimate how important that convenience is to the typical government acquisition professional that's having to manage you. So if I, as a contracting officer, am spending hours of my week explaining to you how to invoice and having to respond to 30 emails with your questions, you have become difficult for me to work with. And I think being difficult to work with doesn't mean being unpleasant. It doesn't mean being unprofessional. And the inverse is true as well, right? It doesn't mean that you can't stick up for yourself and still be a good partner to the government. You can and should advocate for yourself as a small business, but having those capabilities and understanding how to do basic things like, the financial management tasks that are expected of a government contractor, the deliverables associated, what the program manager needs to know, and having that own program management capability in your company that is so unique compared to, just going out and taking a typical commercial project management or program management class. They're very different skill sets. And so this is a conversation we have often with small businesses, is these things are important to the government. And, I'll hear companies say, oh, I didn't think the government cared about that schedule or that paperwork, or I thought that was just something in the contract. Yes, it is something in the contract, and the government expects you to be able to do that. And I'll say one more thing, and then Haley, I want to get your thoughts here too. But I think part of that challenge is, one of the great things that's happened in the last, several years has been some of these programs like the Sitter programs and other grants. The government has started to leverage authorities. Some of them are new, some of them they've had for a while, but just haven't used as effectively. And that has been phenomenal for a lot of small businesses, especially those that have very unique or proprietary technology. However, because those offices that run the program are so focused on small businesses and trying to, attract more new entrants to the government market, they are very familiar with small businesses. They are very patient with small businesses. They are very kind to small businesses. So when those companies, win a few of those grants and they start to look beyond that to subsequent phases where they get more involved with larger, more traditional government acquisition teams, it can be a bit of a shock, right? The expectations are not necessarily incrementally enforced. It can be, kind of night and day in terms of how they're treated, how the communication goes, and what the expectations are. And a lot of small businesses struggle at that point because they're just not prepared for that change. And it can be a little bit confusing. So I'm going to stop there, Haley, and you jump in with your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of come at it from a little bit of a different perspective on the management side, right? From like a program office point of view. And I can say one thing that I really cared about was transparency and communication. And I think sometimes that small businesses, want to promise the world because, they've got this great opportunity, or they have a problem and they don't want to share because they're afraid, it will hurt them. And it will not. Like, what will hurt you is, not being forthcoming or not communicating enough. Because genuinely, as a program manager, I want you to succeed because then I succeed. Mm-hmm. So if you have a problem, let me try to help you. And maybe I can help you, maybe I can't help you, but, let me try. And so I think one thing from at least the PM point of view that we really cared about was, transparency and communication. To caveat that though, like Megan said, we do expect you to have some level of education. So I don't, the communication can't be that I'm emailing you 13 times a day, managing all these other contracts, but definitely don't look at the government like this big, behemoth thing that you can't talk to. It's just a person on the other side too, mm-hmm. right? And it's just a person trying to do their best as well. And so mostly just communication, transparency, and honestly, just don't overpromise. Just talk about what you're trying to do, and we'll get there together.
Yeah, we see that a lot, because you're trying to show your confidence in what you do. And so we hear that a lot. I've talked to businesses, what is it that you do? And they're like, whatever you need. Well, it's not a good answer. We'll talk about that later. But I think to shed a little light on something that has enlightened me now, knowing from how you've answered that, I see now why large businesses, the primes, the bigger smalls that move up into mid-size and large businesses, why they hire ex-military or internal government retirees, because they already understand the inner workings of that. It's defeating for those of us. I mean, when I was going after jobs and I was getting passed up, I was like, listen, what does old man River have on me? And my network is like 50 times bigger than his. Well, it's like they didn't have to teach him how to talk government speak, how to talk military language, right? They would have had to do that with me. So it would have stalled their process too. So to your point as well, it's not that you don't like them or that they are rude, but the interaction of it is stalling your process. And I think every small business listening to that will understand it, because small businesses really understand about being able to pivot and move quick. That is the allure of being able to do business with a small business, is that they are more agile than the bigger companies. So that should be a lesson learned that you're hearing now, those of you who are listening, that when you are building your team, it shouldn't be off the table to do that, to look towards ex-military or ex-government people who already have that expertise, that they may have to work a little harder on building that network, because it is, Haley, to your point, it's a human to human environment. We still gravitate as human beings to working with people that we know and that we trust, and that takes time to build. And so while you might understand the way the government works and the acquisition process works, you still are going to have to build those networks and build those relationships, right? So it isn't just that they jump in and can hit the ground running faster than someone with a real deep understanding of what the proficiencies are of the company. It's that they've already bridged the gap because of their prior experience. And so that light bulb went off in my head, and it's like, okay, all those people that I had on the list of, I don't like you anymore because you didn't give me time of day. Now I understand. So I still might not like you as much as I would have otherwise, because you didn't give me a shot when I wanted it, because I have that higher opinion of myself, of course, and will make everything about me, right? But now I get it. It makes total sense. And so I hope everyone, like I said, I hope you're taking notes on this, because it's enlightening me. And I've been doing this for quite some time now. And that was a perspective that I hadn't thought of before, even though I've heard it. You're articulating it more eloquently than I think we've ever discussed on this program before. So I love already that it's just lining it up you're teaching me as I'm listening. So I know everyone else that's on this is learning as well. So this is exactly, I'm super excited. I mean, I love this. And so let's keep moving, because I want you to be able to give as much information as possible. So in terms of engaging in the federal market, what makes it different for the smalls and non-traditionals, in addition to what we've already talked about? I'm sure there's some nuances that you guys can shed light on.
Yeah, we can just kind of keep flowing the same way we have been here. So again, I'll give maybe a more high level answer to this. When it comes to federal market entry, when it comes to just knowledge and engagement in general with the federal market, we actually conducted a pretty big research study back from like 2016 to 2018. And we boiled down the pain points to 3 major pain points. And I'll focus on the first one today because I think it's the one that's most poignant, which is access. There's a major access pain point for small and non-traditional partners, and that is access to the people, problems, and data that you're bringing to the table and solving. And so when you talk about some of these incumbents that have been in the system for a long time, a lot of them have butts and seats roles. That means they're sitting next to your program managers, they're in the skiffs, they know the problems innately. And even though there are mindful firewalls and things like that in place, that information spreads. They understand this ecosystem, and so they know the problems that are to be solved, and they don't have to go through the process of customer discovery that a typical small business would have to go through to really nail down the pain point and bring a solution to bear that is meaningful. At the same time, we have that expectation that those problems are known and understood in a meaningful way. And so on the federal side, we don't really take a lot of time out of our day to offer that engagement to small businesses or to non-traditional partners, right? And so what we do is we have our, formal legal solicitation processes, which I equate very much to the telephone game we all played in kindergarten when we learned it was a terrible place to communicate, right? Where a bunch of people through a succession, and this time written instead of whispering in people's ears, try to communicate a need, and then it ends out on the street, and you're making your best, doing your best to guess what it is they're actually asking for. And who knows how close you are to the mark. It can be really hard to figure out that way. And so having that advantage of having that access is so huge, and it can be very difficult to get away from. And so I think that's one of those major challenges, a lot of ways to get around that, and happy to, tap offline on that conversation, maybe a good blog post. The other one that I'll bring up is it's really the next two are broken into 2 pieces. One is that sort of runway and longevity. So having that stability around your company in order to wait out government processes and wait out the sort of whims of folks on the inside. And then the final one is process complexity. And I'm not going to try to touch that. I'm sure Megan and Haley can touch that way better than I can. But that longevity is big too, right? And that's where I think folks like Parabolis come into play to really bring some stability and longevity to the table, because you're not getting quick wins, right? It's 12 to 18 months to your first federal contract, and that's not usually a guarantee into recurring revenue. And the folks on the other side don't understand that, because the majority of the people that they work with can wait around for 2 years for that contract to get figured out, right? It's not impacting them. And so it's pure ignorance that they just have no understanding how that impacts you. And so they're going to get the closest alligator to their boat, and they aren't realizing how that's influencing you. So that stability and longevity is a big one too.
Yeah, absolutely, Austin. And Teresa, you didn't ask me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I mean, this is one of the things that I think is so special about Parabolis, right? Is their unique understanding of these challenges that small and non-traditional face, which is absolutely that funding stability. Going a little bit into something Austin touched on, one of the biggest challenges is the infrastructure required for companies to even engage and get started in the marketplace. And what I mean by that is this. So you have a lot of different entities that are involved or conduct due diligence, but whether it's investors or accelerators or other organizations like that. And that's phenomenal. And there's been, again, more programs that have opened up to assist with that. But what they don't look at is the due diligence around the kind of specific government infrastructure that you need to engage or to succeed through early stages of selling to the government based on what your use case or technology is. So one of the things that Austin and Haley and I have done before is we will just have a conversation with companies very early on to kind of assess where they are. And we can ask very basic questions, for example, we'll speak with an AI software company and say, okay, who are you selling to? What's your use case? Well, I want to sell to Intel analysts, which is our favorite answer. That was a joke. It's very difficult an audience to sell to. But the next question is going to be, great, where are you with, and I'm going to intentionally use an acronym here. I know everyone loves when government folks use acronyms, but great, where are you with your FCL? And the company will look at us and say, what's an FCL? Well, right away, we have a problem, right? Because your entire plan is going to be limited, because a lot of your customers that you're targeting, you can't even have a conversation with them to find out, to what Austin was just talking about, what they need so you can start to plan your go-to-market strategy and your timeline and all of that from there. So I think a lot of companies underestimate or just don't know what they need in terms of those specific, government compliance requirement, be it facility, security clearances, accounting systems. Cybersecurity has become, pretty cumbersome in the last few years, rightfully so, but it's quite a process. And a lot of that you need, I think, much earlier on that a lot of companies understand. And, I'll add one other story here because I think it's an interesting perspective. There was a Wall Street Journal article a few months ago criticizing the way the DoD works with venture-backed companies. And their rationale had to do with a number of awards companies backed by VCs were receiving. But what's interesting to me is, we have personally engaged with a lot of venture-backed companies and had conversations just like this, right? Where, we ask these questions about, okay, you want to sell to this type of customer. Do you have these things in place? And they don't. They don't know what they are. They have no plan to do it. Just they're not familiar with it. But in the commercial world, you would never get mad at your customer for that, right? That would be on you to understand what you needed to talk to your customer. But it's interesting to me that in the federal sales space, we often get mad at the DoD for not being easier to sell to, right? Which is kind of an interesting take. So it is a challenge for small businesses to even get started in the marketplace. But again, that's one of those things where, Auxo, we want to help support and share that education. And that's where, again, working with, a company like Parabolas can really help because it gives you that space and that time to plan that out and figure out, okay, exactly what do I need and how is it going to cost and when would that kick in so you can plan effectively and really understand your customer and where you're going to go in the federal space.
I think that is important to highlight in addition to for the fact that so many small businesses had something, they were working for someone else, making another person's bank account bigger and realized that they could take it to market themselves. But what they didn't realize, right? And we talk about it a lot internally at Parabolas is a lot of small business owners are functional operators and they don't know how to run a business. So they don't have effective tools both as a business leader themselves or with the infrastructure around them to really set themselves up for success outside of what their proficiencies are. And that almost is more important is having all of those things in line because you're always going to have a competitor that might edge you out on one small little thing. But to your point, if they had effective infrastructure in place and a foundation of a business practice, you'd be able to communicate that more efficiently and then streamline into the process of the acquisition, the way that the government does business quicker. So even though you might be, a little bit less bright and shiny than your competitor standing next to you, they don't have to hold your hand through every stage of it. So they're going to move past you and they're going to move into that. And there's a lot of layers to that. And a lot of it has to do, the two biggest pillars are education and funding. And, I think there's a lot to be said for that because those are also two areas where it requires a little bit of vulnerability on the business owner to recognize I'm the single point of failure for my company. If I don't say, hey, I don't know everything, I'm going to bring people like Auxo in to shed lights on that, or I'm going to bring in a lending partner that understands government contracting as well and can say, this is how you incrementally grow. Because everyone wants to hit the ground running and have that hockey stick growth and then, be in business, 10 years and then merge or become acquired and be rich and living on the beach. And it just doesn't always work out that way. So having an adequate business plan that includes financial plan lined up next to it, instead of just throwing spaghetti up against the wall and praying that your team can make you look good, because we all know what's going to happen. Past performance is key in this industry, right? In terms of getting the next opportunity. But if you miss the mark on the opportunity that you have at hand because you couldn't hire the best people because you didn't have the funding to do it, or have the best, technologies in place in order to capitalize on what is imposed on the contract obligation, CMMC is a great, highlight in that conversation because it is going to cost you to get up to speed, and you will never do business with the DoD if you aren't in compliance with it, no matter what size you are. And it's just get over it. But if you don't have a plan in place, you don't know how to navigate that, and so the systems fail all the way down the funnel of your business structure because the plan never included what you didn't know. And it's like, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry that you didn't know what you didn't know, but you probably should have been more patient with the process then to learn and grow, and maybe had a side job that you were, or maybe not have quit that job and gone out on your own until you really knew that you were going to be successful, because it doesn't turn over on a dime. And sometimes when it does, I've seen companies, 6 weeks, 6 months into business, win a prime contract. And it's like, that's great, but now the onus is on you 100%. Like, being a sub first is not like a detriment to your capabilities. It's going to teach you through navigating with that prime potentially what it will take to be one day as well. And so I love, you're brightening my day 1,000,000%. And Haley, I'm sorry to have jumped in before that, but I was like, holy cow, before it slips my mom brain, I wanted to get in on that. I'm sure you have something that you'd like to add as well.
No, just one quick thing that I don't actually wrote a blog post about this a while back. The government has a very long memory. And so I think what's different for small businesses than big primes is that, to your point about past performance, is the big primes can mess up, and we know about it, and it's in the news, and they overrun and they're over schedule, and they still win contracts, right? Over and over again, they win contracts. And a small business that has no past performance has to work so hard just to get in the door because they don't have any history. And they mess up one time and they're done. Because the government will remember. And if you were difficult to work with, they will remember. They will tell all their friends. And so it's a little bit to add to the, I don't want to say unfair, but because small business does have a lot of leeway that primes don't have. They get a lot of slack. So I don't want to say unfair, but I definitely want to say it is different for them, in that, you sometimes only get one chance.
Yep. I couldn't agree with you more. Past performance is king. And so we really need to make that a focus when we're bringing things to market, because I'm trying to make light of it, but the government's like an ex-wife, right? Taking inventory so they can bring it up later. They're not going to forget. I only say that because I am one, thankfully. And so I know from experience. I've got that right here so I can use that for later. So it's a real thing, and definitely something that small businesses should be noting in the process. You performing mediocre is going to mean that you're not getting that next shot. So, definitely make sure you're setting yourself up to perform at the highest level. And there's lots of things that come into play with that. And so all great stuff. Okay. So let's close out this conversation talking about, tidbits, words of wisdom, and piece of advice that you would give to small businesses, new people into the industry looking to thrive in the federal market.
Man, this is such a hard question because I have about 1,000, and obviously we could fill a year's worth of podcast recording on this. I think if I had to pick one thing out the gate, and as we roll into holidays and New Year while we record this, it would be take the time to seek clarity. It is so easy to get into this space and to see opportunities and to just buckshot all over the place and to waste resources and to waste time. Before you jump into any of that, take a step back. Get very, very clear on why or if the federal market even makes sense for you, what that actually means, and who you should be working with. Are you actually selling to the government? Are you selling to another federal vendor? Are you actually a B2B partner in this ecosystem? Are you a sub? Right. And then make sure you understand what you want your niche role to be inside of that. What problem are you solving? And how does that look? How are you willing to engage and play? And that will trickle down into all the other things. Some of the things Megan talked about how your actual infrastructure needs to be set up. Some of the things we've talked about who are the people that I actually need to be talking to, right? Taking that time, taking that beat to seek clarity is so critical and so important. And otherwise you might find yourself, 2 years down the road, money thrown all over the place that could have gone into your commercial product and nothing to show for it. And so take the time, take the step back, ask those really, really important questions and make a decision. We personally, from our mission, would love to see every company that comes to the table want to serve national security and serve public good through federal partnerships. We also recognize it's not the right answer for a lot of companies. So before you get excited by what seems like this abundance of opportunity, take a beat and really look inside and ask if this is the right thing for you.
That's great advice.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is why I don't like going after Austin, because she takes all the best answers first. But no, absolutely. I think you have to do your homework. You have to understand really what you're getting into. And, I met with a very, very type A CEO one time, and it was my first meeting. One of his investors had asked me to meet with him. And, right out of the gate, he came in very strongly and said, well, why should I even do business with the federal government? And I said, I'm not sure you should, right? And it's entirely possible that at the end of this conversation, I will advise you not to do business with the government. And I think that companies need to understand that that may be the answer, because it's difficult to work with the government. And so I think, kind of going back to what Haley was saying about being unfair, it absolutely can be unfair, right? But I think that, if the expectation is that government business is fair or easy, you have to understand, if you're chasing government business because you think, oh, there's a lot of money here, then there should also be an understanding that, of course, it's going to be hard. If it was easy, everyone would be Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin. There's a reason there's a handful of primes. It is challenging. It takes a lot of knowledge. It does take some luck and some timing as well. I think, to Austin's point, really, really planning and being patient and not just jumping in blindly, I think, can save companies both a lot of time and a lot of money, and also just a lot of personal heartache and frustration for those functional founders, like you mentioned, Teresa, that are passionate and deeply intertwined with what they're offering.
Right.
Mine would just be, don't let the government play with your emotions. There is a lot of, you're excited about your product, you're excited, you think, you figured it out, you're going to sell to the federal government, it's going to be great. And you meet people in the government and they're excited and they tell you these big, tall tales. And sometimes those are true and sometimes they're not. And my biggest piece of advice is don't take everything that the government says as the gospel. Don't assume that every person in the government you talk to is an expert. I'm not saying, walk around being skeptical of everyone, but back to kind of Austin's point about making sure and being educated and understanding, that's part of your due diligence, is that you need to be educated enough that when you have a conversation with the government, you can say, oh, that doesn't sound quite right to me, or I'm not so sure that what you're saying really makes sense for me and my company, before you just jump right into an agreement. And so my thing would just be cautiously optimistic, educate yourself. Don't let them dictate your highest highs and your lowest lows. It's a long game. If you want to do business with the federal government, it takes time and it takes patience, and it's incredibly frustrating, but it can be incredibly rewarding.
Absolutely. I mean, trust but verify, right? We say it a lot in a lot of different industries. And, I think that truth be told, to whom much is given, much is expected. So if you're given that high return that is yielded in a government contract, a lot's going to be expected of you. So don't think just because you won it that you automatically are winning long-term. It is a, day-to-day process. And so, I would add to that as well about being able to be vulnerable, right? Understanding where your limitations are and building a team around you, because a lot of business leaders mistake ego for their ability to grow a business. And being confident is one thing, but letting your ego get in the way of your growth is what I usually see in businesses that are under 5 years. That typically is the choke point for them, is that the business owner wasn't willing to let loose of the reins in certain areas and get advice from people who know more, because they just didn't want to admit that they didn't know what they didn't know. And, if you're not learning, you're dying. So you better get out there and figure out where the intersections of that are in your day-to-day, and meet with businesses like Auxo that can shed some light from a really deep understanding. I mean, you guys have super excited me. I'm a geek when it comes to learning something new. And I've learned so much today that I literally could have you back on every episode and be able to highlight something that everyone that listens to this show would benefit from. And so if you guys are ready, I mean, giddy up. I'm going to be sending a lot your way. Parabolis is 100% supportive of the efforts that you've put forth in your education platform. And we would love to link arms with you so that we can share this with our clients and the network at large. And so I'm extremely grateful. You're each very, very busy. more so than you'd ever allude to in public. So thank you so much for spending time with us today and really giving some fabulous information to kick off the new year.
Thank you so much for having us on, Teresa, and the whole Parabolas team. We really appreciate it. And everyone get out there and get at it.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us as well. We pride ourselves on sharing the most insightful and exciting people and information to help you better navigate your GovCon journey. If you like what you heard today, you can see all of our past podcasts, which are archived on our YouTube channel by the same name. Stay tuned for all of our future guests in the coming months as we help you grow to great heights in the year ahead. I'm Teresa Moon, and this is Spilling the Tea on GovCon. Have a great day, my friends.